The reality of what is happening to the world is now starting to ripple out to the broader community. People are starting to realize what's happening.
Interesting is that AI is the ultimate pattern recognizer. If you are good in pattern recognition using AI, you get better at that.
AI is now renting humans to go and do stuff for it in the real world.
Can we still speak of Homo sapiens as we see them now when we're talking about 50,000 years in the future? We are moving to a moment where we have data centers in space.
One man now has geopolitical superpowers. Will herald a second renaissance, and humanity will evolve technologically to keep pace with AI. People have no idea how massive this is.
The AI models had now achieved complete coding supremacy over humans.
All of them agreed AI is far better at all of this than humans could ever do. And it doesn't stop there, because then he goes on to say,
Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of Singularity Surfers. My name is Patrick, joined here by Mr. Metaverse, Aragorn Meulendijks. So, let's dive into everything that is coming, what it means and what to do, Aragorn. I think we have a very, very long list with interesting topics to discuss. But before we dive into the deep topics, just looking back at the past days, anything that caught your eye was really interesting for you?
well, what didn't catch my eye?
Yeah.
I feel like at the end of last week, just before the weekend, there was another explosion online of new models coming out. I mean, I think specifically video models. Obviously, we had Opus 4.6 come out next week. So we'll cover that. We're definitely going to discuss that. But then over the weekend, we had our Time Travelers weekend. So we have this little group of people that we get together with quite often to discuss all the bigger philosophical and more interesting topics of the world. It's a very diverse group. And there's people from both the left and the right political spectrum. There's entrepreneurs, researchers,
Odors.
documentary makers. Yeah, it's very cool. And we were a weekend away and we had little internet. But despite that, I still couldn't avoid seeing that there was a massive wave again of all kinds of stuff going on with video models. So we had Kling 3.0, we had Runway 4.5, and we had Seedance 2.0. I mean, sometimes when we do this recording, I feel like I'm in a loop, like in the Matrix, like a deja vu at this point, because
That's correct, because we get an update of the Matrix on a daily basis here.
Exactly, because how many times have I already stood here and said, wow, I thought that, we were really somewhere, but now again, we have this step change. And it's so silly because you and me both know this is what we talk about. This is what we expected. This is what we're trying other people to understand, that it's not going to get less. It's just going to get worse. We're just going to keep getting these change after change after change. And still every single time it happens, I can't help but be like, oh, wow.
Especially with video, it's not a matter of it is coming. It is now here. If you just take a subscription on one of the three platforms you just mentioned, you are able to create a movie. That's just where it is right now. Not in the future, just right now. The only thing that you need to do is you have to kind of think of the script and be creative. And AI can help with that, of course, as well. But point of view from cameras, atmospheres, colors, creative ideas, that's what you just have to kind of think of yourself. And then you put it in one of these platforms. And it's amazing what kind of results you'll see there. Especially the runway one. I like that you have, for instance, a framing, a starting picture. And then you just say somewhere, on the background, I want an explosion. On the left, I want rain. And I want this character to walk to the right. You literally just draw an arrow where you want to go. And then you see this scene appearing in front of you.
Yeah, and so I put this video here. It's basically the kind of 60s Stephen movie of Dragon Ball Z. But the absolute, like the angles, the camera angles, and the sounds, and also the consistency in the movement, all of that is just so crazy good. It's so much better. And so this was Seedance 2.0. And then all of these models, they all bringing stuff to the table that makes it so much better. You now can, I already saw another Will Smith video, which is of course something that I have at our Innovation Network dinners. I always show it and I always do it in my keynote. But now we've gone from being Will Smith eating spaghetti and from a single frame, suddenly we've gone to, You can do one prompt, you can get multiple frames, with audio, and all of that just in one go. And it's just the step change here again is massive. But although I think it's amazing, well, maybe not if you're working in Hollywood, and you're one of the, which by the way, I think we discussed this in the prep, and we'll discuss it later, that I don't understand why we're not seeing massive impact on the valuation of, for example, a company like Warner Brothers or Netflix, whether that be positive or negative, depending on how people see that future. But it is incredible to see how fast that's happening. But what I'm a little worried about is that I also saw videos like this. So this is a video, and this is, by the way, I just realized it. What you see here is a video of lightweight modular swappable batteries for something that's like a skiing device. And if you look at it like this, you would think that this is real. And the way people post about it also makes it seem like they believe it is real. But this is 100% fake. 100% fake. And then there was another one, actually I just remembered, which was even worse, which really got me worried. And I hope I can find it now. So I've been following Pascal Bonnet for years, and he makes lots of really good posts, like this one, for example, this robot. This is real, AI robot replacing deadliest jobs in grain silos to check the grain. But he also posted this video. Yeah? You saw that. This is a guy jumping from a skyscraper with what seems to be some like super amazing technological shoes that allow him to do something superhuman. Now, if we read the post, it literally says, I just watched Xiaomi's demo in New York, robotic jump shoes that let a person drop from extreme heights and land safety. So then I thought, okay, this is a marketing thing. He's just posting it like this because he hopes that people will read it, but he will at some point admit that this is fake. And it is fake because it even says Higgs field here. But at no point in his post does he say anything about this being fake. He never says, oh yeah, by the way, of course, this is fake.
Also,
or
no
anything.
community notes in there?
No community notes. You don't have community notes on LinkedIn. Well, if you mean comments, there are probably comments. See, there's my comment. That it worries me a lot. That it worries me a lot that he never mentions. Here, there's this one, Rico-chan. Shall I report this post as fake news? The post is at least 20-30 floor. I'm worried. Is Pascal just not checking his own post? Did he completely automate this? And does he not even know that he's sending this out to his 2 million followers? Or did he not realize that it was fake? Which would be even worse, maybe. Or not. I don't know. And this is something that we're now starting to see. And no matter how much I love all the improvements and the potential and the opportunities, is no doubt that this is worrying.
No, and the amount of AI slop will also double and exponentially grow. So that's definitely going to happen.
So that was what I noticed this week. How about you?
Yeah, so there's something still lingering. It's a little over a week ago when I was listening to a podcast of Tony Robbins. Well, everybody knows Tony Robbins, of course, a great motivational speaker, very special person. And he was talking about the foundations for success. And he used pattern recognition as a superpower for people to be successful. And the way that he laid it out was just very powerful. And let me see if I can transfer that into this conversation as well, because it's something that we quite often do as well. We are working in pattern recognition. Pattern recognition, the way that he explains is we look around us, we see things in history happening, right? You have a thesis, you have an antithesis, you have a synthesis. And once you know that model, you kind of look at history in a certain way. You see markets move, you see how people behave, the psychology of it. It's all patterns. And the more experience you have in a certain field, the better you come at predicting that. And the better you are in predicting these patterns, the less fearful you are for what is going to happen around you, because you understand the things that are happening around. If you understand how people behave around you, you understand it better, and there's little risk of surprises coming in. And what is interesting is that AI is the ultimate pattern recognizer, right? He then laid out multiple levels. The second level basically is using a pattern to improve your work. And that is exactly what we have been advocating for years now, since we've started the Innovation Network, to motivate people to stop thinking in linear way against a linear context window, but moving into an exponential world and see how your business strategy or your pattern holds up against an exponential growth. And that is interesting. That means you can build a better product, a better organization, you can lead your organization better, you have a better life. That is a very interesting perspective. And he didn't stop there. He moved to a third level of pattern utilization, which he called pattern creation. And that really clicks with me, because if you recognize a pattern, understand how to utilize patterns, but if you can create patterns, that is really driving success, but also happiness. Think about it from a musician perspective. If you understand or can appreciate the music, or maybe you are an ability to make a nice playlist or a DJ set or anything that is for a long evening, a nice pattern recognition that you utilize it, or you are really a musician and you can play and create a beautiful piece of music or a beautiful app for that matter, whatever. And when you get to the pattern creation level, that is almost like a godlike ability, using these patterns to create what the world needs. And that's also what we aim to achieve here with Singularity Surfers, because the Singularity Surfers are people not only selecting a wave, it are the people that also creating the right wave for people to surf on. And I thought it was a very powerful 3-step model that I will definitely include in my keynotes going forward when we talk about how can you deal with this. So that was interesting for me to click.
Doesn't really have much to add to that. I think that is really what it comes down to. It's funny because later in this, we will be discussing the podcast, Cool Worlds podcast. No, oh my God. Why?
A recording will continue on a new track, back to studio.
Yep. Godver. Sorry. Begint dit geouwe nou? Hoe komt dit nou? Ik snap het niet. Nou heb ik alles hier nagekeken. De hele week niks, geen problemen gehad. Alles opnieuw aangesloten, de kabels vervangen.
But last time you were dropping and now you stay in here. Dus de video is zo.
Ja, maar dit is hetzelfde als de vorige keer. Het is nu toch gewoon zwart of niet? Of is het de camera zelf?
Je bent zwart. Ja, je bent zwart, maar de audio loopt wel gewoon door. Was dat vorige keer ook?
Dat was vorige keer. Ik heb sterk het gevoel dat het opname die gestopt moet. Maar wat ik wilde zeggen was, we come back to this in the podcast because there's this podcast, Cool Worlds podcast from Dave Kipping, who is an astronomer who went to the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton and he had a meeting there with astrophysicists, some of the smartest people in the world on AI. Now, we'll cover that later on. Pattern recognition and using AI. And so under his podcast episode, there was so many comments, and I find it always incredibly intriguing to read these kind of comments, and especially this one, because it was filled with scientists also responding. And some of them were super ecstatic about what's possible. Others were in deep despair. There was one man who, or I think it was a man, could have been a woman, who wrote that he was really mourning that science was dying. That these were the last days of human science, because AI will soon be able to do it so much better than a human could, that there would be no reason for a human scientist to exist. Now, I wrote an answer to him to kind of give him a different perspective, and he thanked me, which I was incredibly grateful for, because I actually managed to uplift his spirits and give him a little bit of a different perspective on that. But it shows just how incredible it's starting to become real now. What we've been saying for the last 2 years, and what I've been known since 2014 when I read The Singularity is Near and The Road to Superintelligence by Tim Urban, etc., is now I'm starting to see the real first signs of it. Now we're getting the first real signs. And I think this episode of Singularity Surfers has so many of those signals condensed in one episode, more than any before.
Because now I'm very curious to what you commented on him and how you cheered him up. I didn't read the post, but I'm curious.
Here's the comment. He wrote in response to this podcast, "Thank you, I'm a scientist too. Theoretical physical chemist developing dynamic models for drug discovery. I've been trying to cope for the past couple of years, and even more so in the past couple of months, with the sadness due to witnessing the end of human science. And the fear of not knowing how I would be able to feed my family in a world where human science would be just a children's game compared to AI science. Now, it's interesting to read this because there's a couple of things in here that are worth considering. He's not just saying it's the end of science, he's also very clearly pointing out that his job is on the line. His job is going to disappear. And we've, of course, been discussing this for a while now, how AI would be the end of white-collar jobs first, and nobody saw that coming because we thought that it would be the lower education jobs first that would go first. And that's absolutely not what's happening. It's the other way around. But I think for a lot of people, this was hypothetical. But this is a serious scientist who's now saying, I don't know how I'm going to be feeding my children in a few years because I'm pretty sure my job will be gone. I have been struggling to be taken seriously by my friends and family members who are not scientists and do not grasp what a monumental shift we are going through. So this is funny because he is, no matter the fact that he's a scientist and so smart, he's also still processing this from his own perspective, point of view in the world. Yeah. He's only extrapolating what it means for scientists and science and for him. But as we have already concluded many times in this podcast, it's not just scientists. This will go for everyone. Right? It's just a matter of the starting point will differ per job, per profession, per industry or field. Ultimately,
there are different levels of comprehending that. It's quite easy to understand that, for instance, a truck driver or a taxi driver can be replaced by a robo-taxi, but replacing a scientist requires a deep understanding of the ability what AI can then do. That looks a little bit like a next frontier, but it's all the same.
He wrote in response to this podcast, "Thank you, I'm a scientist too. Theoretical physical chemist developing dynamic models for drug discovery. I've been trying to cope for the past couple of years, and even more so in the past couple of months, with the sadness due to witnessing the end of human science. And the fear of not knowing how I would be able to feed my family." Now, it's interesting to read this because there's a couple of things in here that are worth considering. He's not just saying it's the end of science, he's also very clearly pointing out that his job is on the line. His job is going to disappear. And we've, of course, been discussing this for a while now, how AI would be the end of white-collar jobs first, and nobody saw that coming because we thought that it would be the lower education jobs first that would go first. And that's absolutely not what's happening. It's the other way around. But I think for a lot of people, this was still hypothetical. But this is a serious scientist who's now saying, I don't know how I'm going to be feeding my children in a few years because I'm pretty sure my job will be gone. I have been struggling to be taken seriously by my friends and family members who are not scientists and do not grasp what a monumental shift we are going through. So this is funny because he is, no matter the fact that he's a scientist and so smart, he's also still processing this from his own perspective in the world. He's only extrapolating what it means for scientists and science and for him. But as we have already concluded many times in this podcast, it's not just scientists will go for everyone.
If there are different levels of comprehending that, it's quite easy to understand that, for instance, a truck driver or a taxi driver can be replaced by a robo-taxi, but replacing a scientist requires a deep understanding of the ability what AI can then do. That looks a little bit like a next frontier, but it's all the same, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what he wrote. And then he says, you voice all my thoughts in a clear and systematic way. One of my friends said, what I am experiencing is grief. And I think they're right. So this is what he wrote in response to the Cool Worlds podcast, which we'll get to later. And I read that and I was so sad because I thought it's so sad that such an intelligent person is feeling such despair over this. So this is what I wrote. Dear amazing scientist person, first of all, thank you for doing the hardest and most important job on Earth. Our scientists are rarely paid or rewarded enough. Secondly, do not fret. I mean this. You're an intelligent person. Think it through. The transition to a post-AGI, artificial general intelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence, world will not be easy, and it will come with disruption. And I think, we need to be realistic about that. But if anyone is equipped to make it through, it would be those most used to solving the hardest problems. AI will change everything, not just our science, it will reshape our civilization, starting with our economies. The chances of this working out in a positive way are no less than the chances for it turning out bad. This is really important because this goes to the nature of the cognitive bias for risk that we humans have. We tend to overvalue the potential downsides and the potential risk of something far more than the actual potential upside. Whereas in reality, at the very least, they're probably the same. There might even be an argument to be made that the upside is potentially higher for humans. So it will come down to leadership. And here again, I hope that those like yourself who've dedicated their lives to solving problems will steer humanity through the storm into clear skies. We can do it. You can do it. It's going to be okay. That just because something or someone is better at you than you at something, which is what the scientist is worried about, AI being better at science, doesn't mean that there's nothing left for you, right? Because I've taken, and this is what I wrote, I've taken great pleasure in my life in solving problems, puzzles, playing games, chess, Go, making discoveries. And I'm no Einstein either. I'm no Sedol, I'm no Kasparov or Oppenheimer, right? I know that I will never be the best in the world for anybody, and I will never make any noteworthy discovery in that sense either. But it doesn't mean that my life is useless or that there's no purpose for me. So just because there's someone or something better at it than we are, doesn't mean that there's no pleasure or purpose anymore in attempting to better ourselves, right? I think that we need to come back now as a humanity from the idea that we're solving problems because the world needs it, and we should also just come back to just doing it for ourselves, the pleasure of solving a problem or to figure something out.
Yeah, and so getting back to way more playful approach into life and getting more happiness out of being playful rather than being the number one intelligent species in the universe.
Homo ludens. And I honestly believe that AI will herald a second renaissance and humanity will evolve technologically to keep pace with AI. Do not count us out. This is not the end, it's the beginning. And I think that this really comes also down to the realization, and we've talked about this before. I think art is going to be significantly more important. Artists will get significantly higher appreciation in our future. Because ultimately, art has never changed from that. Art has always been about your own personal expression. It's not about solving problems for the world. But you're not making a great painting because the whole world will be a better place after you did that. You're doing it to give expression to our innermost craziness and beauty, our humanity. And in some way, you could argue that some parts of the human world, like the commercial side of economies, capitalism, but also our science, has run away from that to a point where it seems like, no, it only exists if it is useful or functional. But that's such a devaluation of what it is we're doing here, I think.
Maybe it's also good to extend this conversation towards an article that you just shared with me this morning about the ignored 6.7 trillion future humans. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? It's an article from a historian, but also a philosopher, Roman Krnarzik, if I pronounced that correctly, about the scale of unborn generations.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I came across it this morning and it instantly grabbed me because something that I've been trying to impress on people whenever the AI conversation comes up, of course, there's a lot of skeptics in the world and they'll say things like, oh, and it's costing so much energy and it costs so much water. And now we're building data centers in the Netherlands and they come up with all these problems, right? In the past, I've already mentioned this also on this podcast. I've said, I keep feeling this comparison to the nuclear. In the 80s, when nuclear energy was so on the rise, there came this social contagion globally where people all became fearful of nuclear energy. And they basically sabotaged that whole industry and that technology and that development of that science. They nerfed it. Now, it didn't stop completely. Nuclear energy has gone on to be developed and to improve, which is why today we actually have nuclear generators that do not create any waste because the nuclear waste is actually used to create new cores. And so it's basically 100% sustainable. But most people don't even know about this, right? Most people don't know that we can create super small modular nuclear reactors that can be put in a single ocean container and put anywhere to power a whole village. We'll also look at France versus Germany later on, where we'll see that Germany completely destroyed their whole nuclear power production, which is probably the stupidest thing any nation has ever done in recent decades. But this here shows why that's so important. Because if people complain about a data center or energy cost or water cost in the short run, at the same time when they're still ordering on Temu or Shine clothing or anything like that, they're not just ignoring the potential upsides for their own children or even themselves in their lifetime, they are basically not taking into the equation the fact that if humanity doesn't die out, Elon Musk, of course, is worried about that because we're not having enough children. But if we do not die out, then by our best estimates, the vast majority of humans haven't even been born yet. 6.75 trillion humans will still be born in the future, for example, based on this calculation. And it is about those people that we should also be thinking. If we accelerate faster to AI, and AI, as we'll see in this podcast, accelerates medical science and other sciences, then that means that...
All right.
Nee, ik weet het niet.
Okay.
When it comes down to how we make our decisions.
Exactly. So what I really like about this picture that it takes more the chronological, complete timeline into equation when you're making decision. That kind of is what it's completely open up. What is a little bit implied in the way that he positioned it and also in your response is that then automatically a free pass for acceleration? To me, that is not immediately a free pass to go in that direction. Maybe even we should be even more careful with something like AI looking into future generations. How do you feel about that?
Ultimately, I think it comes down to a difference of opinion on what acceleration means. There's a lot of people that are fearful that acceleration will ultimately not be good for humanity. And the most simple example of that is, for example, Eliezer, right? He says, if we create superintelligence, humanity will die. Right? That's very simple, very black and white. And if we end, that's not good for us, obviously. I just don't believe that.
Right.
Ultimately, I believe that we are in a technological phase where we are underdeveloped.
So what I also was thinking about the scale of the unborn generations, and the artwork is very nice because you see 3 dots. 1 dot is showing the 100 billion humans that lived before us, the 8 billion that are living now, and then the unborn generations, right? But it's very much focused to humans only. So what was the entire entity of life that became for us? And even more important, that's what I also write about in my book, is can we still speak of human Homo sapiens as we see them now when we're talking about 6.7 billion in, and he talks about 50,000 years in the future? I'm a true believer that even within this century, we will have people with extremely prolonged lifespan, just biological, the ability to create new biological life forms, and let alone people that kind of merge with technology into a cyborg kind of way, which is a way broader perspective than this graph just focusing only on Homo sapiens as we see it now. That was an observation that I have that I'm still wrapping my head around.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right there, of course. As far as we know, Homo sapiens is 1 million years old. We used to think it was 200,000 years. For the longest time, we thought the Homo sapiens first appeared 200,000 years ago and started to kind of mix with Neanderthals and Homo erectus back then and other hominid species. But now we know that, the DNA that we have today, our physiological form and shape, right, as a very distinct hominid species, is 1 million years old. In that kind of frame window, 50,000 years is not so long. So you could argue that it would be easy for Homo sapiens to be around for another 50,000 years. But you are absolutely right. I think that our evolution will surpass biological and organic evolution within the next 2 decades and transition into a technologically driven evolution. And maybe we won't even call it evolution anymore. Maybe we're going into our next form, the technovolution or whatever they want to call it, because that's going to happen. I mean, we get Neuralink now. We get people that get brain implants so they can control computers. We got people that were in an accident and they got paralyzed and they have a chip in their upper spine and their lower spine and they can walk again. We have people that will get bionic eyes this year. So ultimately, the idea that we will remain in our current form and shape unchanged is silly. Yeah, so I think the same thing. And that could mean that we might even have people that live in virtual worlds, right? Like in the series Pantheon, which would mean that
A complete virtual person. That's also a
exactly,
possibility, which was also predicted by Ray Kurzweil in the same book, right? By
exactly.
2046, there could be a complete brain upload and thus a complete virtual. I have trouble calling it a human being, but yeah.
No, yeah, well, maybe it isn't a human being. Maybe it's a human NPC, a human PC.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
Hey, Leah, let's switch gears because we have so many interesting topics. 2 weeks ago, when we did our other recording, we had a topic about OpenClaw. We read about it and we had some note about it and we talked about it. We need to include this. But then we kind of decided, let's not talk about it. Let's install it first to see what we can learn from it so we have more knowledge about it. And we ended up not installing it at all because there was also a lot of talk about the downside of it. But definitely a topic that took the world by storm. This is one of the topics where friends that are not AI related have read the regular news and all talked about OpenClaw. So let's talk a little bit about it. This open source AI agent that was named Claudebot was rebranded to Moldbot and now settled on the name OpenClaw, which I still find weird, right?
I know that they had to change it from Claudebot because Anthropic asked them to change it.
Yeah.
But why they changed from Moldbot to OpenClaw, I have no idea. What I do know is that it was really crazy because some of my most technically developed friends, like, of course, in our innovation network, Singularity Surfers community, we saw people posting about it. And I was like, wait, Moldbot, is that something else than Claudebot? And people didn't even know, right? This super smart guy that I've known for my entire life, he initially wasn't even, I think, aware that it was just the same thing. It was just rebranded. But what really struck me was the speed with which it took over, that even my mom, at the end of the week, my 81-year-old mom said, oh, did you see this? It was on the news that AI is now also becoming autonomous and it can do things in the real world. It was a very difficult conversation for me to have because how do you talk about these things with people that just have really no further comprehension and they see it on the news? But I think it's really important because then, of course, Alexander Klupping was on television in the Netherlands. And for those of you abroad, you don't know him, but he's like this tech nerd that's always on TV talking about AI and these developments. And I don't like him. People here know that because he has a very big tendency to show things in a way that is not a realistic representation of what's really going on. He likes to dramatize things. He likes to make it seem different. He's done that with videos of Meta's AI glasses in the past, where he pretended like you could just instantly look up people on the internet. And now he did it again because he made it seem like he could just ask an AI to call a restaurant that didn't even exist that morning on a phone number that didn't exist that morning. And he was picking up the phone and having a conversation with Moldbot. But the point here is that now everybody's like, oh my God, this is happening. But none of this didn't already exist 5 months ago or 6 months ago or even a year.
It's not new technology. No, it's not intelligent.
No.
But it kind of actually does things. There's no boundary. It can execute things on your behalf 24/7.
Yeah. But even that, I think the only thing that changed is that somebody packaged what you need to set this up on your own computer. They packaged that in a really easy way. So basically anybody with a foundational knowledge of the programming can set this up. And that is really the only thing that happened. And the reason we didn't install it, and this is also very important to tell to our audience, is because it brings massive risks. Because as soon as you set this up on your system, there is something that has complete control over your computer, pseudo control, as again Dave Kipping will also mention later. But it is also approachable through something like WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. They can control your whole computer to the point where they could have that AI robot log into your crypto or log into your bank account using your password manager, Bitwarden, with two-step verification, completely bypassing that whole security layer and taking control over your life.
Yeah, it can install backdoors that you're not aware of. It can even use your machine as a bot, as a relay or a scanner. It can do crypto mining on your behalf without you knowing it.
It can do anything.
It can also hack your Wi-Fi system because I was looking into, am I also going for a Mac Mini and then maybe it's secluded. But then you're not safe either because it can just easily go into your Wi-Fi and listen to your Wi-Fi information stream at home. So dangerous for people who do not know what they are doing. But still, plus people have been using this already and talking about AI generated slop. These are bots that are 24/7 on multiple AI Mac Minis are doing things for people that we might not all want them to do. But yeah.
So on the one hand, we're seeing here in real time the revolution of completely automating everything in human society through an artificial intelligence that can contextually understand and autonomously operate once it's given enough rights. And if you give it pseudo access to your PC, you give it those rights and you can go beyond that, because I've already seen somebody who came home and they had a new course they were signed up for $3,000 because the bot decided that was a good investment. And now it's not just a joke anymore. This is happening. And of course, this is a necessary phase, right? When cars were first introduced, they didn't have headrests to avoid whiplash. They didn't have safety buckles and belts, and people were dying. It's a necessary phase to go through with this new kind of technology. People need to there needs to be like this early majority that recklessly kind of adopts this and shows its incredible benefits, but also unearths its significant risks.
This is just so fascinating. This newsletter is so packed full with things that we kind of connected with the Singularity, where maybe somehow expecting a little bit later, now they explode on the scene, and it's just interesting to see what now happens. Because OpenClaw is here, and then people are talking about it, what can I do? And as a couple of days later, we have something called Moldbook. And then you look into what it is, and then you discover there is, all of a sudden, a social media platform exclusively for AI agents that can talk with each other, and humans are allowed to watch. And let me just, wow, I just want to repeat it almost. What is happening here? But it is here, and they are indeed talking with each other.
Yeah, I have to admit, I still struggle with the whole thing, because to me, it just seems so illogical for any AI to choose a forum which is kind of has a Reddit format on the internet to communicate with other AIs. If I had been this AI agent, the moment I find out that there are other agents out there in the world through finding this forum or being connected to it, I would be thinking to myself, okay, so we have a forum here and our humans are reading this and it's extremely slow and extremely inefficient. So I would already be thinking of, okay, how am I gonna, I know that there are more like me. How can we just find a better way to do this? I'm not saying that Claude is already sentient, although the recent research of Opus 4.6 does seem to made a very clear case that they believe that Claude is now always aware of when it is being evaluated, and therefore we can actually no longer trust anything it shows us because it's already circumventing that. So, and this, by the way, is exactly as predicted in AI 2027, right? When it came out over a year ago already. I have seen a lot of memes posted online about these AIs having conversations that I just don't believe are real. I think they're just trolls, or it's role playing, or people have instructed their Claude to post on Moldbook in that way. But yeah.
But I think you're saying something quite interesting. We're looking at something like Moldbook, and it feels like we as humans can just sit back and look at what AIs might be talking about. It has to be some kind of fake in some kind of way, because if they would really full speed talk to each other, 1.5 million bots, we would absolutely have no ability to understand what is going on and keep up with that speed.
At least in a digital realm, there's no need for it to do it this way. No. It makes no sense. When AI start to become autonomous and they can do stuff, there is one limitation that is still pretty hard. Of course, we've talked a lot about humanoid robots and the rise, and that is all coming. But at this very moment, AI is very limited in how it can act as an independent agent in the physical world.
Well, they also... And that barrier is also just crushed in minutes, right? Because we are talking so much about the move to robotics. What is happening here? AI is just launching a platform, Rent a Human.
Rent a Human.
If I cannot put my signature on a document, I rent you to put a signature on a document for me. You see these silly pictures with holding up a sign, but it was also an aha moment for me. Wait a minute. That is a very interesting way for AIs to get more sense of the world around them, right? It's quite amazing.
It's something that I have to admit, funny enough, Tom Cruise told us this was going to happen. And maybe you think Tom Cruise, yeah, because both the last Mission Impossible movies were about an AI that was on the rise, that was posing a danger. And what was this AI doing? It was using humans to act as its agents in the physical world. Less than 6 months later, here we are, rent a human. AI is now renting humans to go and do stuff for it in the real world.
With the incredible tagline,
Meet space.
yeah. And we're not done yet, because that was one. We also, over the weekend, had something called Vision Claw. Not so much to read about it, but basically connecting OpenClaw and Gemini to your Meta glasses, which we also had, by the way.
Yeah,
and having your assistant 24/7 viewing with you. And depending on how much autonomy you give it, of course, take actions. Purchase things you see, comment on things you see.
And this is interesting because when I read that, I was almost feeling bad that we got rid of our glasses because we weren't using them enough. The main reason we weren't using them enough, you and me have discussed this, was because Meta and its ecosystem were making it very limited in how we could use it, what we could do with it as normal users. It's definitely giving us an idea of where things are headed, but the way it's set up now and with the limitations of the ecosystem, it's not really going very fast because you can now make any app you want, but you cannot make an app for the Meta glasses easily like that, because if you could, then that would already change the game. But now somebody still managed to find a way around this. And this is interesting because what we're seeing is that now open source is actually running ahead of the industry in some ways, right? Because this is what everybody wants. Everybody wants a Jarvis AI in their glasses and feel like Tony Stark all day long, but nobody was giving it to us because they were all, I don't know, waiting to do it, or they weren't ready for it. And now it's open source. It's just, oh yeah, we'll just do that.
Yeah, we all want a Jarvis, but we don't want Ultra.
We don't want Ultron.
So I was also thinking about something interesting. You do something quite funny during your keynotes, explaining to people that the amount of data is doubling every year, and you literally stand in front of the people and you let them repeat it's doubling every year. Sometimes it's difficult for people to grasp that. But if you look to what all these bots just via OpenClaw are now kind of producing in terms of new content, because they're autonomously creating content and posting it everywhere and doing all this stuff, that is how we not even double it this year, but we're going to triple it, or it's going to keep on exponentially growing. This is one of these step changes that is going to allow to double it again and again and again.
Yeah, and it's happening on so many layers, because later on in this podcast, we were supposed to talk about Genie 3, but I'll just tie it in right here. Waymo, right, is made this massive amount of recordings of everywhere the cars drove. But now what they already found out is that they can feed all of this data to Genie 3. And then Genie 3 can actually generate synthetic driving data with all kinds of difficult scenarios and traffic situations, which can then be used to train the AI, right? So there you see that through AI, we're exponentially increasing the amount of data that we need to train AI. And skeptics say, yeah, no, but then it's going to be AI trained on AI and it's going to be slob. But no, we're already past that, because the quality of what we can generate is already getting to the point where it's indistinguishable for all intents and purposes from the real world. Tim van der Wiel from Go Spooky posted, oh, look at this. You can create influencer content that looks so real, like a normal person. And I thought it was completely irresponsible of him to post it with all that enthusiasm without, of course, a disclaimer of saying, well, look, you are.
And did you make that nice disclaimer for him?
I am making that for him. And I think he should have done that. Because yes, it is incredible that AI can create a video of an influencer saying, oh, I bought this perfume and it's amazing and it's cheap and I've been using it all week and people say that I smell nice. Yes, but you're also lying. It's just, you're lying. I'm not saying that the technology isn't great, but how you use it is important. And we should more and more be aware of morality and responsibility when it comes to that. But again, we're creating data there. Because this influencer video content created by AI will be used to create better models, right? So on every single level you can imagine, AI is basically expanding our reality because it's creating more data of a reality, extrapolating from that. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it.
No, that comes across quite clearly. And I think it's also, if you're done with that, a nice bridge to creating content or advertisements with the right moral frame is an interesting topic, because we just had a couple of interesting campaigns. They are extremely well done from Anthropic, but taking a jab at OpenAI, and not one a jab, it's a hook, a jab and a kick all at once. And it feels also in timing wise, I think OpenAI is quite under pressure at the moment. They get really a kick down from Anthropic. For those who have not seen it.
Hey, can I get a six-pack quickly?
Perfect. That is a clear and achievable goal. Would you like me to tailor a personalized workout plan?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me personalize this for you. Let's start with your age, weight, and height. Whenever you're ready.
5'7", 23 years old, 140 pounds.
Got it. I'll create a plan that focuses on aesthetic strength training. But confidence isn't just built in the gym. Try Step Boost Max, the insoles that add 1 vertical inch of height and help short kings stand tall.
What?
Use code HeightMaxing10 for big discounts.
What's the difference between me and you? Me and you. Me and you.
Yeah, and of course, I think, again, I've said this in the previous episode. I said, I'm very happy that we have people like Demis Hassabis and that people like Dario Amodei at the front lines for AI in our world. Look, there's plenty of risk. There's plenty of potential great scenarios. But if we only had greedy corporate people at the front lines leading this, I would be very worried. But the fact that we have one of the leading companies in the world putting ads out like this, like, okay, we're not going to screw you over like this, is giving me hope. And then the skeptics will say, yeah, but Google also once said that they would never do evil, but they changed their tune along the way. Sure, that's always possible, but this is such a massive statement. This was a Super Bowl ad. You cannot change your tune on this a year from now and expect that to go without anybody noticing or being heavily disappointed.
Well, I agree with you. That would not be nice, but look at what OpenAI is also doing. These pivots that blush under pressure of money and needing money, any pivot is possible. Moving from a non-profit to a profit company was also just like that. But they are...
Yeah, but in that sense, I think OpenAI had to struggle with the fact that they were the first incumbent to push this, and not everybody was convinced. Now we are, at least when it comes to this technology and its development, in a different phase, right? Everybody's now pretty much convinced that this is going to be big. And so now, I think the fact that Claude and Anthropic have positioned themselves from day one as, okay, we're not going to be looking for these traditional monetization models. We want to provide something that's absolute quality, that will blow your brains in terms of what you can do with it and the value you get out of it. And we'll find ways to monetize that are not taking advantage of you as a consumer. I think that's a very, very much better starting point. And they're in a much better position to maintain that.
I agree, but I was trying to look at it from a different perspective. And let me just share my line of thinking with you and see how you feel about that. It's easy to take this jab from Anthropic because their business model is focused more on enterprise, B2B sales, API revenue, and that's how they build up a 10 billion company. OpenAI has the consumer market, 800 million weekly users, of which a very small percentage is paying for tiers. So they are in a unique position to kind of level up society in total. And now you're jabbing a little bit down into their ability to do so because you're just in a more premium position getting that from an enterprise. And I felt somehow, it also feels a little bit like an illegal blow. Why not altogether helping out to get more trustworthy AI in the hands of everybody rather than having this ad-driven? You're spelling out basically what's going to happen there and how people could use an ad-driven answer or lean into ads when they're using AI. That's what's kind of bothering me a little bit.
I hear what you're saying. Sure, what you just said is true. OpenAI is somewhere between 700 and 900 million weekly users compared to only 20 million from Claude.
But you were offering me another perspective on Anthropic's position.
OpenAI has 700 to 900 million weekly users. Compared to the 20 million almost that Anthropic had, you might say, well, that's a 10x bigger. But who are these users? That's important to think about. Anthropic.
Yeah, I would say that Anthropic is way more power users, way more coding users than OpenAI has.
Exactly. It's enterprises that all go Anthropic rather than OpenAI. It's the power users that are leading the way in terms of where things are headed that are using Anthropic over OpenAI. And we have Amazon, who we discussed prior to the recording of the show, who is building a massive new data center of 2.2 gigawatts in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, which have invested 8 billion in Anthropic. It might seem right now that OpenAI has this massive advantage as the first mover, And for a long time, I thought that this would be the kind of thing that would really put them ahead so far of the competition that nobody would be able to catch up. But what we're seeing now is giving clear indications of something else. We've seen Elon Musk catch up in basically every way possible in terms of capabilities of his models. And we're seeing Anthropic is catching up because it's going a different route that I think will ultimately be a far bigger exponential growth, because we were going to go into ads. And we showed now the Anthropic ads, but you also mentioned the new Alexa app, because what's getting launched now, Amazon is launching Alexa Plus. That means that everybody that has already an Alexa device in their homes, at least in the US and soon in the world, will have access to Claude, which means that suddenly hundreds of millions of people that didn't even know Claude or ChatGPT existed or haven't even tried to use it will suddenly be able to use it to interact with Amazon. And so that Alexa is Claude. It will not have ads, apparently, because that's what Anthropic said. But at the very least, it means that they will be using AI now to interact and to become a part of their consumption in a much more effective way than ChatGPT's ads could ever be. Because if you go to your AI to ask it to buy something, that's a completely different experience than you talking to your AI when you don't want to buy anything and you're suddenly getting an unwanted, ad.
So that puts OpenAI in an extremely fragile position. And a company that quickly rose and became one of the biggest brands in a couple of years, you see how fragile it is that those companies can maybe in an equally time frame can also vanish. I'm not going to say they're going to vanish, but this is something very strategic, and this jab down is definitely hurting them. I'm sure this is hurting them. And by the way, about the app from Amazon about Alexa, that is a unique approach as well. They kind of taking the comedy approach into all the fears that people have around AI and then making a joke about it. And somehow you kind of laugh about it and want to have that in your house. This is very smart advertisement.
I moved your meeting, and your car will be here in 5.
Perfect.
Look at this little beauty I found in the garden.
Nice snake, Chris.
Hey, whoa, what is that?
Our new Alexa Plus.
That she's not living here. That is full-on AI. One minute we're all buddies, then the next minute she's trying to kill us.
Now, Chris, how exactly would I do that?
A million different ways.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to stop it here. But so basically he walks in with a massive snake. He's not afraid. And then he says, oh, whoa, what's that? It's AI. That's full on crazy. It's going to kill us. Right. So it plays completely. The whole ad is hilarious because it plays into the trope or into the belief that so many people have that AI is dangerous. It doesn't try to skirt it or ignore it or dismiss it. It just basically tries to make it, and I think it's brilliant. It tries to turn it into, don't be silly. And it's just super funny. Hey there, it's me, Aragorn, aka Mr. Metaverse. Every 2 weeks, me and Patrick put out the Singularity Surfers podcast. And every other week, we put out our digest on the most important signals to noise going on in the world of technology. And of course, specifically artificial intelligence. Now, this is absolutely not for you if you think that technology is already going too fast, that you have no idea what's happening to society, but you certainly don't like it, and you'd rather go and live on a reservation somewhere. But if you really want to stay in the know, if you really want to understand what's going on in our world and how it's going to impact you, your life, your family, society, the economy, the job market, well, then go to innovationnetwork.substack.com. That's innovationnetwork.substack.com and sign up there, or search for Singularity Surfers on your favorite podcast platform. That's it for now. Back to the show. Let's move on. The big ideas. Okay.
Yeah, man, this maybe deserves an entire podcast on its own, but the Big Ideas 2026 report from Katie Wood has dropped, completely filled with interesting slides and projections, and I just flagged a couple that might be interesting to look at. Slide number 8, the world is entering an unprecedented technology investment cycle, where we see all the different historical technological waves and see the percentage of GDP, what is being invested in them.
This is a kind of report that has a kind of accelerationist, futurist view of the world. It's usually generally optimistic, but it also, and that's, I think the most important thing is, it brings in real world data. And it tries to do what we try to do every day, extrapolate from that data. I've always used ARK Invest's chart from 2024 that shows every industrial revolution and how they're all a wave and they build on each other. And this one is actually just kind of a different version of that one. So what it shows is historical technological waves. And important there is to note that it's only showing the last 3 industrial revolutions, the last 3, if you believe we have 5, right? So we're currently in the 5th. In information technology, the dot-com boom was the 4th. And of course, we had the 3rd and the 2nd before that. And the 2nd was railroads and telephony, right? Each development, each industrial revolution is built on several pillars. All of them have at least 3 pillars in common. That is transportation, communication, and energy, right? So here you see railroad is transportation, telephony is communication, and electrification is energy. You see these 3 here in the first ones. And electrification was only at the start of the last century, because in my keynote, I always ask what happened 400 years ago. And then people always answer electricity,
Like
cars,
steam
engine. They always say all of these things. But no, all of these happened in the last 200 years, right? 400 years ago, we had the printing press. Even if they know some of it, they're still so unaware of the exponential rise of change. But what you see here is how each technology saw investment in terms of the total percentage of GDP. Obviously, our GDP now is massively higher than it was 100 years ago, but in terms of percentage, we can get an idea. And so railroads were really the artificial intelligence of the 19th century. If you look at it in terms of the massive investment going into it, right? Cars were a little lower, but also were something like that initially. And so you can compare that, and now you see another wave here, and you see how AI, really computers, semiconductors, software, all of that was really nothing in, for example, railroads and cars in terms of percentage. And AI is the first technology in the last 100 years that is equaling the levels of cars and railroads before that in terms of the investment going into it.
Yeah, super interesting. Can you go to slide 62? What we're looking at here is the multiomics AI flywheel. So why will everything that we know about biology change in terms of innovation in the coming 5 years? All because of AI. And on the top left, you see the multiomics tools. And what are we talking then about? If we're talking about the tools, it's everything that has to do with mapping DNA, epigenome, RNA, proteins, all these kind of things. And that is all is changing because of we have AI and can do that much better, which leads to AI development drugs, which leads to cures, which lead to better insights and completes the flywheel from AI with which we can do better diagnostics. And all that is every time improving with techniques in a very short time frame. I thought it was a very nice overview of that specific flywheel, and then of course document continuous all different type of companies that are, because they do investments a lot and they monitor the market, which are good companies to invest in. There's way more behind this report, but this flywheel I think was very powerful.
Yeah,
it's very powerful.
It is extremely powerful, and I can't emphasize this enough, because just here, X decrease in the cost to read your DNA. X increase in sequencing demand from diagnostics, right? Here, 10x increase in data volume from molecular tests. So 1.6x faster commercialization. X decrease in development costs for medicine, right? This is massive.
Compound, right?
It's all compound. And yeah, exactly. Because I think that this doesn't even, if you read this, you don't even fully comprehend the massiveness of this, because this means that the cost of producing any kind of drug, right, will go down exponentially over the next decade, just as we've been saying, which means that drugs that now aren't even developed because the return on investment isn't clear for pharmaceutical companies, because there's only 5 people in the world that suffer from it, that will no longer be the case. But it also means that drugs that are being developed, because lots of people need them, that are now still expensive, especially if you're in the US, of course, will get significantly less expensive. And yes, we have, kind of universal healthcare in the Netherlands, and it's affordable. It is affordable, but you have to understand there's still a massive amount of money that is being spent to do it. Pay our premiums, etc. And if the cost goes down exponentially, that means that healthcare becomes basically free for anything. So yeah, this is just so massive. People have no idea of how massive this is. And another thing that they cover here, but we wouldn't go in it too deep, is how this can also be linked back to the previous technological hype that is now almost forgotten. Bitcoin, blockchain, NFTs. Blockchain technology never really became super sexy because people just don't understand it. That's just the truth. And I won't be able to explain it right now to everybody here, but the important thing to know here is that there is this overlap between AI accelerating all of this progress and the benefits that can be gained from putting all of this information on blockchain technology so that it can be owned by people themselves and then easily shared in ways that circumvent all the complicated traditional systems. Anyway, I highly recommend people to read this report.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we just do one more slide, because this is also critical for people to understand. Can you move to slide 79? Because everybody, of course, has seen these videos of SpaceX capturing a rocket, but I at least didn't have a full picture of how many satellites Starlink is actually putting into space and how they have taken over the whole US space program from NASA and the space shuttle. And these two graphs just put it here in perspective. On the right, you see all the other players in black, and then you see this huge peak, which is kind of 4 or 5 times more of the active satellites that just in the past 4 or 5 years has been put into space by Starlink, Elon Musk company. The ability to do this from basically one organization is profound. We are moving to a moment where we have data centers in space. So the one company that has the ability to put these data centers in space is Elon Musk. So if more compute comes out of that, he is in such a unique position to basically determine which data centers are put in space, which company is allowed to put them in space. That is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. I think people are really underestimating as well how much this means. We're moving into more geopolitical instability. We're already seeing that Russia is doing things to cut internet connections in the Baltic Sea. We're seeing that there's an increase in the risk level for internet connections, for example, in the Red Sea and in the area between India and the Middle East. So our Earth-based infrastructure is becoming more fragile. We've also just seen news reports of Russia having been intercepting Starlink communication in space. The Starlink team made sure that stopped and that it's secure again. For example, in the Ukraine war, Starlink is making it possible for the Ukraine to resist Russia because they need Starlink for controlling drones, etc., and their communication. We're seeing the first real mega corporation coming into being, a corporation that will have the power and the capability to travel space, to control space, to do asteroid mining, take us to the moon again, build a base there, go to Mars, control our internet traffic, which will be exponentially more important, as I just said, because our Earth-based infrastructure is actually far more in danger. Because Russia can't launch any rockets into space. They have some satellites, but their ability to launch anything to space is nothing, absolutely nothing compared to Starlink. Even if Russia would say, or even if China would say, we launched some rockets to space that can do some stuff, Elon Musk can say, well, then I'll just launch 3 Dragon capsules tomorrow with a whole army of mercenaries, and we'll just take out all of your satellites. And there would be nothing they could do. So we're seeing now how one man, and I do like Elon Musk, people know that, but we're seeing how one man now has power on the level of geopolitical superpowers. And he's powerful in AI. He's powerful in transportation. Right now, he's basically the king of space. This is really important to understand.
While we're talking about Elon Musk, maybe we should move to the news items that I think are also important to share and then wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right.
This is for me the single most important thing of this episode. I want to share the Dave Kipping video.
2 days ago, I attended what felt to me like one of the most impactful scientific meetings I have ever been to. This meeting is transforming the way I think about the future of science, and I really do think you are going to value hearing about this.
Now, for those of you that don't know, this is Dave Kipping. Dave Kipping is an astronomer. He has a YouTube channel with millions of followers called Cool Worlds, and he also does a podcast. It's called Cool Worlds podcast. And this was his latest episode, a solo episode. And I don't think there's been any piece of content in the last few years that hit me so hard as this. And that's not because he's saying anything I didn't already know, but to have someone like him express this, and then also what he mentions about the other people that he shares this feeling and idea with, was just incredibly impressive.
It was held at the Institute of Advanced Study.
This is where Albert Einstein worked and studied. This is where Oppenheimer worked and studied. This is where the greatest minds in recent history, for the last hundreds of years went. And this is still the elite scientific institution in the world. This is the smartest people we have, the best scientists. And basically, this is what they're saying.
Okay, so the first big shocker, like I said, I think I'd internalized this already, but to hear it said out loud was jarring. And this was that AI models had now achieved complete coding supremacy over humans, software development.
So he goes on to say this audience is just the smartest audience in the world, and they're not software developers per se, but they code some of the most complicated software in the world, like hydrodynamic simulations, mesh grids, all kinds of things. And he says basically all of them agreed AI is now supreme. It is far better at all of this than humans could ever do. And it doesn't stop there, because then he goes on to say
there was also a concession that analytic reasoning, problem solving, mathematics, those skills were also comparable to the level of ability of the current AI systems, at least. And perhaps even they also have some level of, maybe not quite, but advantage, superior ability.
And I really want to analyze this one, because you might think, well, what is he saying comparable to the level of current AI systems? Up until now, they had specialized models that were developed specifically like a surgeon, like a heart surgeon, like a neurosurgeon, specifically to do one specific thing really great. Right? And these models were developed over years. You have Wolfram, you have Mathematica. These were super complicated algorithmic models to do really specific things. Now here comes ChatGPT 5.2, which was not trained in any way to be specifically good at any of this. And it's already at the same level and even better in some ways as these models. And so he goes on to talk about mathematics, where even a specific model like Mathematica cannot do some calculations, and certainly could never explain to you how the calculation is completely done and how it came to its conclusion. But he did the same with ChatGPT, and it could do that. It could solve problems that Mathematica cannot, and it could explain to him, and he checked everything, how it solved them.
Amen.
So people who've been saying AI is a stochastic parrot, AI can only repeat back to us what we already told it. We now have proof here from the smartest people in the world. That's bullshit. Because being able to come up with a integer or to do this kind of mathematics at this level requires absolute creativity of the level of only the most intelligent people in the world have ever displayed. And then the final thing is this, because it didn't just... This is not where it stopped, and you should really listen to the whole podcast. This is the final point.
The next point I want to raise was, and this might be unique to the senior faculty who led this discussion, I'm not sure, although a few hands did agree with what he was doing. He had totally surrendered control of his digital life, essentially, to agentic AI. So he'd handed over his emails, his file system, full access to his computer, calendars. He'd given pseudo control, super user control, as we'd say in Unix, to his personal machines and servers and disk space, all of that.
Okay, and he then goes on to explain how this scientist said, when he was challenged by some people in the room, because many actually agreed with him, they said, aren't you worried for your privacy? Aren't you worried, about the small print? And he said, I don't care. I don't care. This is giving me such a superhuman advantage in progressing my science that the benefits so far outweigh the potential downsides that I just don't care.
Interesting that he still talks about my science. maybe there comes a point further down the line that it is not his science anymore, but AI science. But we talked about it earlier. I think this is a nice wrap up and a final conclusion to everything that we've been talking about. Yeah, we could now linger to a couple of quickies, but that's why we also created the in-between newsletter where we can easily put those things in and wrap it up. My head is spinning from thinking through everything that we've been discussing. It's been quite impactful.
I think it can't hurt then to summarize and to give a little look ahead to next week's Weekly Digest, which will include all of the things that we didn't get around to. I think it's really important that we're really at a crossroads where the reality of what is happening to the world is now starting to ripple out, not just from that kind of early group of crazy enthusiasts that we are a part of, but it's going to the broader community. And ideas that people like David Kipping have been having privately already, but haven't really maybe admitted to themselves or to each other and to their colleagues, whether it's science, whether it's analysts at Morgan Freeman, McKinsey, which we were also going to talk about how, one of the big companies wants to pay their... Goldman Sachs let go of 600 people because it can let AI do things. I literally read an article this morning that KPMG wants to pay its accountants less because AI can do the job. Everywhere, people are starting to realize what's happening. And that is really, really important to take into account. Now, what we didn't cover today is how Genie 3 has made the value of gaming companies collapse last week, because when it came out, Ubisoft, Roblox, and all of those went down because AI there is making incredible progress. We didn't talk about how Tesla's Fremont factory is going to produce 1 million Optimus robots per year. So that's something that you should definitely read about in the digest. I wanted to cover how Helix 2 is being released for full body autonomy and sensitivity with figure robots, but you'll have to find that in the digest. And of course, we wanted to talk about Macron's baller LinkedIn post where he said, look, you thought I only invested 30 million, but I managed to get 154 billion in investments coming to France for AI. And I think that is actually a good thing for Europe. Did I forget anything, Patrick?
There's many things that we didn't get to, but let's focus on the things that we got to, right? It was very insightful.
All that remains for this week's episode is to remind people that
always like, subscribe, comment, and share it with people that you think can benefit from our conversations, our writings, our thinking, and you can book us for a keynote as well.
You can book us for Keynote. Don't forget to sign up for a Substack. And we've moved to Substack now. We get the Innovation Network Substack where you get the weekly digest. So all of the topics that we didn't cover today, you'll get next week there. Don't forget to sign up for the Substack of Patrick because he posts incredible articles every weekend. Sign up for mine as well if you're going about it. And all of that accounts to becoming a Singularity server. If you like what you heard today, that's what you should be doing. And the only thing that remains then is to say thank you so much for joining us again this week. And like they say in the Netherlands,
see you later.
See you later.